Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is to all of you. Happy Sunday. We hope it was another great week and another great chapter in your book of life. Thank you for coming to join us on the Now That You Mentioned podcast with Roll, Jay, and RJ.
I'm Roll.
I'm Jay.
And I'm RJ. First off, I want to welcome any returning viewers. Thank you for continuing to join us on this journey that we call our podcast. And any newcomers, welcome. I want to start off by thanking all of you for giving us your time. Before we get settled in, if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or Podbeans, please follow us, turn on notifications, and leave us a review. And for our visual viewers here on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and click the bell to get notified when our newest episode drops. And leave us a comment, even if it's to tell us that we suck. Go find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Reddit by typing in the Now That You Mention It podcast and hitting the follow button. Well, guys, it's week 2 of the movie review tournament, and let's kind of jump into it.
Well, before we jump into it, RJ, I'm going to give you kudos. That was a hell of an opening.
Thanks, guys.
There it is.
I really liked it.
Getting better.
You sure are, man. Soon this is going to be the Now That You Mention It podcast with RJ, Roll, and Jay.
No,
it's going to be.
We're a team.
It's going to be the Now That You Mention It podcast with RJ featuring Roll and Jay.
No, guys, we're a team, and so we only go as far as we work together. So it's not about the individual.
So, seeing as this is going to be airing on Sunday. By now, we will have already announced that our week 1 winner in our tournament, in our competition last week, was Uncut Gems, which took it on the show 4-0. It was a clean sweep on the show. Vaughn, our guest last week, myself, Roland, and RJ all voted Uncut Gems as the best movie. We opened the polling to you guys, the viewers and the listeners, and Uncut Gems and took it on the polling as well. So it looks like it was a clean sweep for Uncut Gems. They'll be moving on to the second round of the tournament. And today we're talking about our second matchup.
Real quickly, I want to thank my wife for trying to turn the tide on that, but unfortunately, I guess because RJ figured out how to limit her to one vote per day.
If anything, I'm pretty sure she figured out how to vote more than one per day, which is why the numbers were so close, if anything. But anyways, let's not dwell on the past, guys. All right. Let's kind of start with the newer film that.
Well, wait before we get into that. Let's bring in our guest viewer with us.
Yeah, let's bring in Uncle
Hey!
Gabe.
Hey!
The one and only Rico Suave.
Thank you so much, everybody.
The host of the Made from Scratch broadcast, and our brother Gabe, who's on for another episode with us. This week, we're actually going to rein him in a little bit and try to hold his insanity into the movie realm.
Yeah.
Like that?
Maybe like that, just a little bit.
Yeah.
This week,
I was talking about my penis size, so.
Oh
my God.
I wanted to that big, so.
Hey, I just wanted to let you know we did get a notification from the SEC. We got to tone it down a little bit.
That would be the FCC, first of all.
No, FCC. FCC.
Yeah, that's what I said. I thought you said the SEC.
I thought you said FCC.
Well, sounds like we're both.
I was about to say, what does Southern football have to do with any of this? But the Southeastern Conference is trying to get us all.
FCC. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, moving on to our second matchup this week. We have a couple of powerhouses, a couple of movies that were multi-nominated for Academy Awards. Some of the finest actors of our time in Casablanca, and some up and coming newcomers on the scene in the Korean flick Parasite. So, RJ, why don't you introduce? We'll do Parasite first,
Okay.
Go ahead and give us the introduction on Parasite, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so Parasite was my submission. I had actually seen it, and I kind of figured it was a little bit like Uncut Gem, going to be like Uncut Gems for you two in the sense that it might have been something that you might not have ventured to go out and see. So I thought it would be a good submission, even though I had already seen it. So let's kind of jump into the plot. The Kims are a poor family living in a cramped half-basement apartment. Often they run scams, if you will, to basically earn their source of income. That's how they, afford to eat and get by, is by running those scams. And, the son, Kiwoo is his name. He has dreams of getting out of poverty by one day going to university. But obviously, in order to achieve that, he's got to get the means to get there. And so it starts off, basically, it begins with his friend Min, who is at university already and who is more well off, comes by to give him this stone. It's, I believe, a land stone. And so at that same time, he tells him about he'll be leaving his tutoring job to go pursue his academic goals. So, obviously he becomes this tutor. It starts off, and this is where I kind of feel like some aspects of the movie start is that Min tells Kiwoo basically to lie in order to get the job. And so he goes and interviews to become the tutor for this Parks, and of course gets the job. The Parks are a wealthy family who have lived in their modern house designed by what sounds to be a very famous architect who designed the house and at one point lived there. They're all about, status. And so Kiwoo gets the job and he starts to learn that the family is looking for an art therapist for their oldest son. So he recommends his professional friend, who turned out to be his sister, to be the art therapist, and then just kind of snowballs from there into getting the dad to become the driver, and lastly the mom to become the maid. But in the midst of that, obviously it becomes very hard to get the current maid out of there, as she was there with the builder and architect of the home. So she knows the house since it was built, and it turns out that she's been hiding her husband in the basement. And so what ends up happening is that their house floods, the Kims, and so they quickly need to find housing. So their strategy is to try to implement themselves into the Parks home. And that's kind of my synopsis of it all. It has a very, very surprise ending. But I feel like that was a pretty lengthy synopsis. So I want to kind of talk into it.
Yeah. So Gabriel, as our guest this week, let's go ahead and start with you and let's get your impressions of the movie.
Well, let me tell you what. Was quite surprised, pleasantly surprised, as a matter of fact. I loved from the beginning of the movie, the creative idea, and they really didn't have to go. This is what I loved about it. You really didn't have to go too in depth with the backstory to start out, right? So essentially, it's jump into the situation of what's going on in their lives, and you really don't know too much about these people, but you do get a lot of impressions from the very beginning. Of course, they're poor, the way that they're living, everything else is going on. So you get these things very early on, and I think what the director did and what the writer did as well, when they carried what they carried with the story is they really kept it where they didn't really have to do too much explaining into each of these characters to provide depth. And what I mean by that is they don't go into a whole backstory about why his parents were unemployed, right?
Yeah.
They didn't go into all these stories why he didn't go to university. You got the thing you got these impressions as they went along. So you got
the sense like from the very beginning.
Exactly, and that's what was really great about. I can see why people really like the movie watching it, because again, you don't spend a lot of time most of it is just about going forward in the story, which is what it really is. And then on top of that, unlike most movies that are pretty formulaic, we can kind of figure out bad guy, good guy, or what's coming, what's not coming. You don't really get too much of that in this movie. You pick up subtleties, but you don't pick up a lot. They give you enough to keep you thinking something, but it's not what you think.
Yeah.
So this is why I really enjoyed it, because again, just like we're talking about the young boys, the songs, why he was scared, the whole thing, right? They just tell you that something happened to him, right? You really don't learn much more about that until later on into the movie, what it was, what he actually saw. And then they don't go into big detail either about how the teacher, his teacher, Miss Jessica, how she figured all that out, right? She comes down there and just tells the lady, she tells the madam, hey, did something happen to your son when he was whatever? From there, you're just like, oh my God, okay, cool. You figure out these subtleties as the story goes along. And of course, I like the fact that they played a lot of comedy in there as well.
Yeah.
Subtle. It wasn't beat your head over the head comedy. There was subtle comedy. A lot of it was directed like in backhanded comments. So like whenever they go eat at the buffet after the son gets the job, right? And the dad's telling them, eat up all you want, right? So
Yeah.
he's telling them, eat all you want, go ahead. And she's like, what do you care? You didn't pay for it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the dad's like taking stuff off his plate and giving it on his son's plate, like, here you go, So, I mean, and again, it was a lot of really good storytelling. It really was, you really liked the characters. There was not someone just right overall that you said, you know what, I don't like this person. They just kind of gave you enough about the description, and it was more about what was happening in the story than it was about the actual like characters. Because even at certain parts, who, what they're eventually going to try to do or what they're trying to do. But even then, you're like, hey, this is cool. It's fun how they're getting the whole family involved in becoming a scam artist.
It was interesting. I mean, I got to give it credit. It was I was too pleasantly surprised. The plot was very original, and it did surprise me how quickly the poor family, I guess the Key family, was able to infiltrate into the Park household.
Yeah,
within a very, very short amount of time. And just how scary, deceptive they were. Just referring to a scene where they're rehearsing their lines at home, so they know how to prepare the scenario under which they're going to get rid of the housekeeper and get the mom inserted. And I got to tell you, the daughter to me was extremely scary in terms of how smart, how aggressive, and how devious she was. To be quite honest, I felt like she was kind of the mastermind of the whole family.
Yeah. And that's the sense that I got too, man. When I was like watching like the part where the driver's taking her home and he starts to hit on her, like the quick thinking in her mind, hey, let me take off my panties and put them under the seat so that I can get this guy in trouble.
Exactly.
And the way that they play the mom, against all the other members of the family, hell, even against the housekeeper who'd been there for, years. Man, you're right. She was scary smart, man.
Yeah. And just how cold and tactical she was, particularly like referring to the scene Gabriel was talking about where she I don't want to say confronts the mom, but she, in some way, she kind of confronts the mom about the trauma of the boy. And she's just so confident in her delivery. And you realize that all she did was really do a little bit of research on
Google searching,
psychopath.
Yeah.
But she's able to come across and how quickly she bonds with the boy. But but when they take over the house, when the Park family is out on their little camping trip vacation, it's also the daughter who becomes the most emotional after she gets drunk and starts talking about, hey, quit talking about all the other stuff. Y'all need to figure out how we're going to take care of us. Right. So you can tell for her singular most important thing is our preservation. Right.
Yeah.
And it's almost it's very sad to some degree that she's the one that gets killed, right?
Yeah, I think that was intentional.
But that's what I was saying. But I also think that was intentional. That like she was the most dangerous of them all, and she ultimately is the one that winds up getting killed. And
because even the scene where once the mother actually takes over the housekeeper job, when she's serving the fruit, she goes in there, gives it to the dot to her Kevin, and then she walks in there with the young boy and her, and she tells her, next time leave it outside. Don't come in here when I'm
that's right. Yeah. Knock.
Knock. Don't come in here when I'm doing my sessions with him. Like fuck, that's your mom, dude. You know?
Right. Yeah. You know, so RJ, what was your impressions, RJ?
Well, so originally when this movie came out, I heard a lot of the hype around it. That it was a very kind of messes with your mind, if you will, a little bit. And obviously based on the name, I hadn't really done much research about it, but I knew it had won awards. Everyone was kind of talking about it. And I really didn't go into this expecting what ended up being the movie. I had a different, just based on the name, of course, but having obviously watched it, it's so crazy. A lot of the undertone messages that are in this movie that are in some senses so subtle. For example, obviously, this one isn't subtle. It's kind of very in your face, but they talk about the class. They're basically, discussing the class warfare. How the poor live versus how the rich live, and how they kind of treat each other. And I don't want to take credit for this, but I don't also remember the article that I got it from. Was that when I was researching for tonight's episode, I came across an article that basically said it also subtly is telling you about how climate change affects the two different classes, the wealthy and the poor. For the wealthy, it's just look at the rain, from our nice home. Whereas for the poor, they have to deal with, the flooding issues, and obviously, they end up having to go to a shelter, and so, I mean, there's some very interesting, obviously real life society conversations to be had. But from a movie perspective, man, this movie just was like Uncut Gems in the sense that, you're very drawn to, or maybe not drawn is the right word, but it keeps you kind of.
Well, here's the most impressive thing, right? This is why I say it was tough scoring this, but this is why I said what I scored the way I did. I'm impressed because none of these people I knew or had any preconception notions of. And what I mean by that is
in terms of the actors.
Yes, as opposed to like where you're talking about Uncut Gems, you knew Adam Sandler, you knew there was a lot behind it, and I think with this you fall in love more with the story than you do who's portraying these people.
This is one of those rare times where the movie is completely story driven. It's not a star driven movie. This is not, Humphrey Bogart in Casablanca, which we're going to talk about later. Well, you know who he was. You know who Ingrid Bergman was. But
I'm going to bring this up when we do the voting too. But that was one of the things about it. Was hard for me to really gauge the star power because we have no context of those actors. Right? Those actors may be big deals in Korea, South Korea, or some in the Asian, film, the film community, right?
Yeah.
So we have no context of them, right? So to us, they're unknowns. The other thing too is I think the format of the film, obviously they're, sometimes when you have foreign films, things get dubbed into English. I did find it just a little bit tedious and trying to keep up with all the translation at the bottom. Particularly because on certain scenes, like when they show the phones, right, and your eye is drawn to the phone and the text of the phone, which is obviously in Korean, and it kind of it kind of bleeds over into the English translation underneath. So I had to actually go back and watch some scenes to see what the texts were saying, or certain things, or when she's on the computer, right, and obviously falsifying documents. But I think, but I would agree that the story is what was refreshing in this. It captivates you, it keeps you engaged, and it is suspenseful, right? But not with so much over the top.
Drama. I gotta say though, sometimes having such a strong storyline, right, makes up for so much. And the only reason I say this is I'll mention this movie. I'm pretty sure you guys have seen it, but Inglourious Bastards, right? Yeah. Historically, contextually, totally incorrect. Nothing about that movie says is right. But yet, you believe it so much so because the story was so strong and what it was talking about, so much so it won Christoph Waltz an Oscar for playing a character.
And the thing is, I'm kind of like in the same camp with Roland. I'm not that big into foreign films, just because I'm not, especially watching them at a movie, because watching a foreign film at home is different. You can pause it, you can rewind it to go back and say what was said here, or what was the context of this message or something.
But haven't we been?
If you get a little distracted at the house, you can go back and kind of rewatch it. Whereas if I would have seen this at the movies, I think I would have been a little upset, because if I missed something or some of the text was too fast, I would have been mad. But what did they say? I would have had to go back and research, and like RJ, was talking about the whole, class warfare thing. And I think The Rain is a great example, because when you look at it from the perspective of the Parks, the rich family, it's a minor inconvenience on their weekend because it cancels their son's birthday party. Yeah. Whereas on the other family, it's a major event because it kicks them out of their home.
Well, they have to go find
a place to live. And just the scene, man, that I thought was one of the saddest scenes was, the daughter sitting on the toilet bowl, smoking the cigarette she had hidden in the wall while the stuff is flying out of the toilet underneath her, and you're like, man, nobody should have to live like that.
Right.
But unfortunately, in countries like that, that's kind of the way it is. And, and I think countries like, Korea, like that has a bigger divide in class than even in the United States. Yes, in the United States, you have rich, but you also have a middle class, and then you have your poor people. Whereas in countries like Korea, you're either rich or you're poor. There is no in between. There's no middle class in Korea. Yeah. You're either rich or you're in the working class. And that's kind of the way it is. And, the twists in this movie, I think, are what kind of got me at the end, the way the movie ended, because it was, again, something I was not expecting. As I was watching this, I think to me, what I was expecting for the ending was these guys are finally going to get caught. They may get arrested. Mm-hmm. They may just get kicked out and get shamed in their community. You didn't expect, what happened to them to happen. Yeah. And I was really literally with my wife going, holy shit, I think
just to kind of take it back to star power a little bit, I think that this could be one of those movies where, if you had like an A-lister, and not, I mean, like my dad was saying, I mean, it's all in context. What I mean is, like, if Leonardo DiCaprio had been in this movie, I don't know if it would have been the same, just because I think you focused more on the story because we didn't really know who these actors were, rather than like, oh wow, Leo's doing such a great job acting, or things of that sort.
Right.
But I think it's well written. It's a thriller. Obviously, like Uncle Gabriel says, some sense of comedy, but it's not one of those. It's not like Uncut Gems where it's chaotic and it sounds like none of us felt like, oh, that was so tough to watch, or I think we all feel like it was a great film, and the real travesty is that these two movies had to go up against each other rather than one go up against Uncut Gems and the other go up against Xanadu.
Because Xanadu might won. You're right.
It could.
That's all right. Hey, let's move on. Wait.
Let me bring up one more point before we go. And just real quick about the subtitles. I usually watch all my movies anyway at home with subtitles on, so that really doesn't bother me because it doesn't matter if it's an American movie that I know and understand and I've seen 100 times. I prefer just watching it with captions on. I don't know why. It's just something I've become accustomed to. I watch everything now with captions on. So watching the foreign movie when Jay said, "Hey, watch it's got captions in all Korean," I was like, I don't care. It's captions. I watch the same. It's the same thing if I were to watch The Fifth Element and watch it again. I still watch it with.
Yeah, but you're actually fortifying the dialogue is with two of your senses, because you're listening, you're hearing what's being said, you're also reading what's being said. So if one, for example, if you miss something that you didn't listen, you probably caught it with your eye when you read it, or vice versa. If you didn't get it quick, if it was a little bit too fast on the screen for you to read the whole context, you probably heard it. And either way, through one of those two senses, it sunk in. But in subtitles in foreign languages, you lose one of the senses of obviously hearing, because unless you speak the language, you don't know what's being said. So you're solely dependent upon the reading. And because I at times, certain movies, what I noticed in certain movies, and you guys probably noticed this too, that as they transition from high level action scenes, the volume goes way up. Yeah. And then when they bring it down to the more slower emotional scenes, the volume goes down. And so on certain TVs, they don't necessarily always adjust the volume levels throughout the movie to keep it, pretty consistent across the entire running time of the movie. So there are times when you're grabbing the remote to turn it up, it's like, what the hell are they saying? Or
the scene comes on and you're like, oh my God, that's so loud.
Yeah, exactly. The same thing. It's like you've got it turned up so loud because you had it on the slow parts or the emotional parts of the movie, and then here comes the action scenes, and all of a sudden you're like, damn,
that just means your sound editor sucks dick. You probably need to fire that guy and find somebody that's competent enough to know, hey, let me before we go into post production and put this thing out here, let me check the editing sounds to make sure it sounds even.
Well, unfortunately, it's a lot of movies
before Gabriel starts insulting all of Hollywood and never gets a job there. Right. Let's grab some scores. RJ, let's start with you. How did you score the movie?
Yeah, so plot, I gave it a 5. Like I said, I think the underlying tones in the movie are great. Obviously, I've expressed that I feel that it's greatly written. All of us seem to think that, we were able to watch the movie and not really be distracted or at least, not really be paying attention or focused. So I gave it a 5 on that. Star power, I gave it a 3. Okay. I went and looked up, these actors and saw what kind of other movies they've been in. It seems like these guys aren't no-namers, but I also, from an American perspective, they're not Leo, they're not Adam Sandler, they're not our A-listers or even someone that's a global icon. So I gave it a 3. I feel that's a pretty adequate score. Quality of acting, 5. Just to give one example, like my dad was saying, is that sister, man, she just was so great in the movie. And then, obviously with the ending, it was hard for me not to give it a 5. It was great acting. Emotional buy-in, I give it a 4 because, you're kind of really invested in how this thing's going to play out very early on because, obviously to some extent, these people while they're manipulating things in their favor and scamming this other family, they're also trying to make a living for themselves. I think the subtle undertones are something that we all have to kind of think about. I mean, at the end of the day, we all are humans, and we need to treat each other as such. And then watch again, 5, obviously. So total score, I give it a 22 for me.
Well, I'll go next. For me, the total of my score is a 20, and this is how I broke it down. The plot, storyline, I gave it a 3.5. It was a good story, but I thought there were some parts of this were a little bit too hard to believe. For example, the rainstorm, yet while the symbolism of the rainstorm and the classism and how it affects both, but how, I mean, this wasn't like a torrential monsoon. At least when you're watching it through the part where they're escaping out of the house, but yet it just totally devastates everything. And it just so happens to occur on the very weekend that the Parks go on their little camping vacation, and the whole family is staying at at their house while they're gone. It's a little bit too coincidental. And then I think the other part of it, which is the other surprise, is the previous housekeeper keeping her husband downstairs.
Yeah.
And just the fact that guy is living in the house and for so long.
Yeah.
And nobody knows except the kid. I mean, that's a little bit just hard for me to believe. Because he's got to make some sound. Someone's got to hear something, right? And I think the other thing too is I thought there were just a few parts that were just a little bizarre. Like, for example, when the husband finally breaks out, escapes at the end, and he kills. As he's dying himself, he just looks over at the homeowner, or Mr. Park, as he's dying, and says, "Respect." And I just thought that was weird. What was the purpose of that line? And
well, because when he was down in the basement, and the dad went down there and was actually trapped down there with him, or was tying him up, he was explaining to the dad that he respected Mr. Park because he was able to live in his house, and it provided for his wife, who was able to provide for him. That I think that's where his respect for Mr. Park was coming from.
Okay.
Yeah, it comes more like what Ali G says, respect.
Oh my God! Yeah,
So,
I'm sure they were very one and the same. Him and Ali G.
And then lastly, the fact that what is the working class family's last name?
The
Kims.
The Kims.
Oh, the Kims. Yeah, the Kims. That's right. The Kims is that the husband loses it because Mr. Park is holding his nose. I mean, I get it. It's the symbolism again of the classism, how the haves think that haves not smell. They have a different smell to them, and he just loses it all, and that's why he kills Mr. Park. I just thought so overall it was still a good story, don't get me wrong. So that's why I kind of gave it a 3.5. Star power, I gave it a 3.5 because I did the same thing. I went and looked up who some of these actors were and try to keep in mind the framework of the context of work, because obviously to us, we don't know who they are. The acting, I gave it a 4 because I thought it was very good in parts. There were, again, maybe a couple things could have been a little bit better, like at the very beginning when the dialogue between the two friends, it kind of felt artificial, like they weren't really friends per se. Emotion, I give it a 5. Simply because it was very captivating. I do think that the storyline kind of draws you in, and you feel both highs and lows throughout the movie. And then watch again, I gave it a 4. I definitely would watch it again.
Yeah. So I kind of scored it. I gave it a 22 out of what I did. So again, plot, storyline, I loved it because it's original. These days in Hollywood, everything is a copycat. Everything is either taken from comic books or something else. Originality is really hard to find. So finding a good storyline is something that I really do appreciate when I watch a movie. So I really liked about that. As far as strength of cast and the star power, I kind of knew going in that I was not going to know who a lot of these people were, but it's the strength of who the cast was as they worked together. So it was really good. It was really believable that these people were all related. These people acted like family. You could tell so much about each one of them. So from that point of view and that perspective, I really enjoyed it. So I scored that a 4 for them. That was really good. Even though you don't know who they were as far as big names, but again, in context, like what you guys went and did, to go back and look and see who they are, what they've done, what they've worked in. The father, Mr. Kim, he's been in a couple American films. One that Boon Soon Hoon did that called Snowpiercer that he did before this one. Where he was in that with Chris Evans. He was in that with Tilda Swinton. So he's acted with other American actors.
The great Tilda Swinton.
Swinton, right? Yes, exactly, right.
Tilda Swinton, dude.
So, and then, like I said, I gave them a 4. Quality of acting, I said 5. That was I was good. I believed it. Awesome. I loved every single part about what they did. But because again, I took it a lot for who these people were as far as the story. Emotional buy-in, I gave it a 4. Because there were, like Roland said, there were certain parts of context where there was something missing, a certain thread that would if they would have connected a little bit more, would have went up higher for me. And then if I would watch it again, 4, I gave it a 4. So that's how I scored 22 because it was a really good movie. I would definitely recommend it and watch it again for somebody else. And it's eerie how both these movies both won best motion picture. They both had best director, and then they both for best original screenplay script. I mean,
yeah, that was that was luck of the draw because once we placed our 3 movies, the rest were all drawn out of a hat. So this is kind of like one of those things where you just get a really good matchup in the first round. As far as my scoring goes. For the plot and storyline, I gave it a 4 as well. Strong movie. The plot, just like you guys, I was captivated the whole movie in. Just when I thought that I was going to be like, I guess this is okay. And as it started to drag on through the movie, and then the ending happens, because to me, I think the pivotal scene that almost lost me was when they were getting drunk in the house. And I was like, oh God, this is stereotypical. I want to be like, the Joneses and I want this and I want that. And I honestly thought that would be the end of it because I thought they were going to get caught.
Yeah.
And then what happened, from there, that's where the roller coaster hit because I was, kind of going, and
one thing I'm surprised you didn't jump on, Jay, because, you have a tendency to do this is the sex scene on the couch between the husband and the wife. While the rest of while the Kims are all under the coffee table. Why me? That dude down there is the one that you should be worrying about the sex scene with, not me.
Yeah. You want to talk about if you want to take that story up a notch, have him bang her have him bang her on the table there underneath, right? To me, that would have scored that level up to a 5 as far as believability and everything else. It would have done that. It probably would have beat Casablanca. So,
yeah. But as far as star power goes, I gave it a 2, just because I didn't recognize anybody, and I think even when I went through and looked up some of the actors, I was like, "Well, I've never, heard of this person." And I know Gabriel said that the gentleman who played Mr. Kim was in Snowpiercer. Let's be honest, how many people actually saw Snowpiercer? It's not like he's a big name. So I gave it a 2. As far as the quality of the acting, again, I gave it a 4. Like you guys, man, I was really impressed because the acting, I think, is what kept me going in the movie. The daughter, how devious she was. The 2 kids, for playing spoiled kids, they played spoiled kids perfectly. The daughter of the park and, the little kid that everybody thought was crazy. And the daughter's even like, he's faking it, right? He's not really like that. He's just doing that to get attention. Great acting on all their parts. The emotional buy-in, again, like you guys, I was in on the movie, man. And then when that ending happened, I was like, holy shit. And whenever you can elicit that kind of reaction for a scene or, end of a story, I think this is on the level of some of M. Night Shyamalan's best work. The Sixth Sense. Some of his better movies. You weren't expecting that twist at the end, and I was not expecting this twist at the end for the father to get loose and just start, stabbing everybody, and for the mom to, hack the dude with the shish kebab, that was the funniest part to me of that was afterwards when the guys all dead on the ground, the dog's coming up and eating the shish kebab. The meat off the shish kebab.
Oh.
I thought the dog was like eating on the guy. I was like, is that dog eating his blood? And then he's eating the shish kebab. I laughed at that part. So emotional buy-in, I gave it a 4. And would I watch it again? I gave it a 4 as well. I would definitely tune into this again. Even though, again, I'm not a big fan of movies with subtitles. I would definitely give it a shot again. So I scored it at 18. And that's it for me on that one.
So speaking of M. Night Shyamalan, some of his best works like Stuart Little. Let's see, what else is there? The Last Airbender. Man, he really knocked him out of the park, man.
Yeah.
Really great work there.
Are we gonna have a Tom Brenneman moment here?
Just saying.
Hey, everybody's mics are live. Okay. Casablanca, the second movie of our matchup is Casablanca, which is a story of Rick Blaine. He's a cynical, world-weary expatriate of the United States who runs a nightclub in Casablanca, Morocco during the early stages of World War II. And despite the pressure he's constantly receiving from the local authorities, his cafe, Rick's Cafe American, has become kind of a haven for refugees seeking to obtain illicit letters that will help them escape from Casablanca and get on their journey to the United States. But when his former lover, Ilse Lund, comes in with her husband that, Rick obviously didn't know about one day, he faces a very tough challenge on whether he's going to be able to help them with letters of transit given to him by Ugarte.
The great Ugarte.
Yeah, that's and then, the complications and the heartbreak and the ultimately excruciating decision that he has to make. Having to choose between love and a sense of doing something that's right. I think that, Rick throughout the movie is shown to be a sentimentalist, even though he claims not to be, having run guns for a losing side in a war, having, no sympathy for the Nazis. It's never really clear his backstory of why he had to flee America and why he's an expatriate. But, you kind of get a sense it was something that he did in the United States. But, guys, this is one of the great movies of all time. I think that, when you look at the story overall, how two people can fall in love during a time of World War II, and the things that break them up, ultimately it's revealed that Ilsa's husband is this big, fighter against the Nazis that she thought was dead. That's why she had the affair with Rick. She honestly thought her husband was dead, and then come to find out that he's still alive, and they get word to her, and she winds up leaving Humphrey Bogart to go back to her husband. And heartbreaks Rick. And this movie is also containing. You hear movies all the time that have misquoted quotes. Luke, I am your father. That's not really the line in the movie, but one of the most misquoted quotes in movie history. Play it again, Sam. That quote is never actually said throughout the movie. Now she does ask Sam to play the song again, but she never says play it again, Sam. And neither does Humphrey Bogart. So it's one of the most misquoted quotes in movie history. But RJ, let's start with your impressions since you're the youngest and probably first time watching.
Love to pick on me when it comes to the whole movies, but all right.
Yeah.
When it started out, first off, let me talk about it as a whole. I think this is a great movie. I'll probably say this again at some point throughout tonight's show. It's just really a travesty that these two had to go up against each other so early.
Yep.
I would have loved for these two to be in the final four, or even be the final. I think it would have been a great. No one would be upset about that. But that being said,
great final.
Yeah, the great final. But
I know you guys are taking shots at me. That's fine. I don't care.
We're just horse playing. But no, I mean,
because Tilda Swinton is great. I don't care what y'all say.
Who cares about Tilda Swinton? We're talking about Olivia Newton, the great
Olivia Newton-John.
Watch this, dude.
No. Technically, so that I don't misquote you, the actual quote was the great and beautiful
Olivia Newton-John.
All right.
Moving on.
I would be that, bro.
This movie
I would be that.
is awesome. I really enjoyed it. Blows Xanadu way out of the water. For just when you're talking about old films. So just so our viewers know, there's no bias against old films. This is a great movie. When it starts out, Rick appears to be this smooth cat. He's very mysterious, but yet respected in this city. Everybody's always asking for him. Where's Rick? Can we have a drink with him? You're like, who's this Rick guy? And then Casablanca, the way the movie make it sounds like such a cool place, at least in that time period. Obviously I've never been to Morocco or cared much for doing research about Morocco. I'm sure it's a place I'd love to travel one day, but it's not in my top, 5-10 destinations. Based on the movie title, it's kind of the same thing as Parasite. Not really what I thought it would be about. I don't know why I had like Dracula type vibes based on the name. I don't know. One of those things where I was like, this is going to be something similar to Dracula. I don't know why I thought that, but was in for a surprise. I think a lot of the elements of this movie are very, once again, relatable. I mean, you can understand why Rick has hatred, for her when she returns. She just kind of left him out in the cold. But then you can also understand why in the movie he gets more mature about it and realizes there's something kind of bigger at stake. But that being said, obviously Ilsa is kind of not the main villain because obviously, fuck the Nazis, but Elsa sure was well traveled, and I don't mean in the tourism sense.
I think that kind of flew over their heads, RJ.
Yeah.
No, you're right. I mean,
I'm my sister who watches this podcast in mind, So
yeah,
right,
yeah. But Humphrey Bogart definitely is one of the smoothest actors out there, man. I mean, that scene when at the very beginning when they're going into his bar, where the Russian chick or the French chick, is hey, where were you last night? And he goes, that's so long ago, I don't remember. Well, can I see you tonight? well, I never make plans that far in advance.
Yeah.
You know, those kind of one-liners off the top of his head just exudes smoothness, you know?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say is, I loved Rick's character, or, the character of Rick. Obviously, Humphrey Bogart's acting. Very early on in the movie, he gave me, John Wayne-ish type vibes. It didn't really take me long to pick up that this guy was an A-lister of that time. Definitely great acting on his part. I don't know, just something about his acting makes you seem like he's a good dude. Someone you would want to hang around with. But the other thing I was going to say is that, the French police or whatever they are, sure are, little, now I see why people constantly are bagging the French about being pansies, because, man, they just bent over right away and took it from the Germans, because whatever the Germans wanted, they bowed down to, and obviously that's a little difficult for me to understand, being born an American, and we've never really lost a world war, but and not trying to make it about politics, but it just seemed like the Germans showed up and it was like, oh, okay, yes sir, what can I do for you? But overall, it's a great film.
Well, it does have to do with politics. I mean, it's kind of what.
What about you, Gabriel? Yeah.
Well,
what's your take?
Again, a really good story. From the very beginning, you're kind of drawn to Rick like everybody else is, right? You get this feeling about him, right? And only thing that really irked me a little bit, and this is why I say this is my hot sports opinion, is he let that broad do what she did to him. Because you figure a guy like him, right? Expatriate, like even though like trying to think about he's going to be the bigger guy. There's a bigger picture here, right? I would have told her, but again, you do have to play along with the story. I mean, if you would have written it modern day, that's kind of like what you write it off. Say, I'm not gonna,
Hey, RJ, on a quick side note, when you edit this, you see if you
I'm
can
not editing this.
put the bleeps in. Put the bleep.
On this one, we'll let Uncle Gabriel get back to what he's saying, but on this one, we're definitely going to have to turn on the
circle.
Yeah, you're going to have to cover that part up. But
we didn't dump it in time. We didn't catch it.
You didn't catch it in time. I should have told you guys about that. But even again, no, it's a classic.
Definitely.
I mean, you can if you were to recommend a movie, if you were to make a list of classic movies to watch, and you wanted somebody to kind of like RJ or somebody, and you want to see how a good script is written, go back and have them watch Casablanca. It is very well written as far as dialogue, the way the scenes carry from one to the next, even for being such an older film. That I do enjoy a lot. I can see why Michael Curtis won for Best Director. It was really shot the way it was, and again, everything plays really well. And just again, if everybody, if you haven't seen the movie yet, you're a fucking idiot. Number one. Number two, spoiler alert: they don't end up together. That's one of the best. That's one of the best fucking parts about it, because it's real life.
The ending is fantastic. Yeah,
it's real life. He's telling you you're leaving with fucking laughs. You are getting on the fucking plane. You guys. And she's like, "What about us?" Well, we'll always have Paris, right? Classic line. You can sit there, and I've heard that repeated so many times, and people probably wonder where that comes from if they've ever seen it. It comes from this movie. And even when people change the city, it always comes back to, we'll always have this. He's sitting there telling her there at the port. So yes, really great movie. Again, I would tell anybody who has not seen Humphrey Bogart ever before, go watch this first before you go watch anything else of his.
Yep.
I think you'll get.
Absolutely. This is how I got my start into Humphrey Bogart movies. This was the first Humphrey Bogart movie I ever saw, and just based on this, man, it made me want to go watch African Queen, and it made me want to go watch The Maltese Falcon, and it made me want to go watch some of those other movies, man, because I was like, dude, man, this guy is fantastic, and I'm kind of like RJ. The first time that I saw this movie, I was like him. I know RJ mentioned John Wayne, but this was one of those movies. As soon as I saw it, I kind of got one of those vibes from him. You kind of get that John Wayne, Tom Cruise vibe, that this is your leading man.
Yeah.
That this is the star of the movie. And for me, this is one of my top 5 movies. I didn't bring it into the poll. This was actually voted in by the fans because it is such a great movie. I mean, it contains some of the best, going back to what Gabriel said, some of the best dialogue. That scene where they bring Major Strausser in to meet Rick the first time.
Yep.
And he goes and sits down and he tells him how we have a complete dossier on you. And he's reading all these other things. And Rick pulls the dossier out of his hands and he starts reading it. And the guy goes, "Oh, don't worry, we're not going to broadcast it." And he looks at him and goes, "Are my eyes really brown?" That's one of the best, funniest lines, man. But one of the best moving scenes in the movie is when, he's upstairs talking to Laszlo, and the Germans are singing their anthem or whatever they're singing.
Mm-hmm.
And Laszlo just comes down and he starts.
I watched in Zim or whatever it's called.
Yeah. And so and they come down, so they start singing the national anthem of France, and how all the French people in there just, swell up with pride, and they just start singing over the Germans, because even though France at that time was occupied by Germany during World War II, they were in free France in unoccupied Morocco. So, even though, like RJ said, the French, the lieutenant of the French police and the police themselves were kowtowing to the Germans because of, things that had happened in France. You knew that they were still in these were still free citizens, and that's how they felt. And that was one of the most stirring scenes in the movie. And
this is what I got to say about that observation. I think more along the line, the impression I got of the French, particularly the I apologize for not knowing his name, but Captain Louis.
Renault.
Yeah,
Captain Renault.
Yeah.
No, is that I don't think he kowtowed much to the Germans. I think the guy's an opportunist. I mean, because you see, he's trying to leverage his position of power to get women. He certainly gets a cut from the gambling, and everything goes on, in there. And then at the end, I mean, it's like when Rick shoots Strauss and him, Strausser, and him and Louis walk off together. It's like, to me, I don't think it was so much that they were kowtowing to Germans. Obviously, I think he didn't want the conflict, but I think he was just an opportunist, right? Because he was just trying to make his ends one way or another.
Yeah. And I think one of the most telling scenes of that, what you're talking about, is when Major Strausser tells him to close down Rick's saloon for the night, and he's like, "Everybody go home." And Rick's like, "You're closing me on what grounds?" He said, "I'm shocked to find there's illegal gambling back there." And the croupier from the roulette table comes, "Here's your winnings, sir." "Oh, thank you." Sticks them in his pocket.
Right. So obviously, I felt he was more of an opportunist than just kowtowing to the Germans. But that aside, what I do feel the story about Rick's character is that he was truly in love with Ilsa, and it broke his heart. So he became jaded, obviously. And I think he really, at that point, didn't really care about anything or anybody, which is why when people would constantly request to drink with him, he just flat turned them down. When the other guy wanted to buy his bar, flat turned him down. Because I truly, honestly believe he just didn't really care much about anything other than his club. And when Ilsa comes back into his life, obviously he laments there by saying, of all the, I can't remember the specific line, and I don't want to mess it up because
Of all the gin joints
in the world.
in all the world, she came into mind.
Right. So, but what I think the story changes for him, or his sentiment really changes for him, is when he finds out the whole story of why she fell in love with him in the first place. But even then, I think he had resentment until him and Laszlo had that conversation. And when Laszlo made the suggestion that you take Ilsa, you go away with her, you know, if I think that showed Rick just how much that Laszlo loved Ilsa himself. And I think that's where he said, wow, this guy is willing to send his wife, who he knows, Laszlo knows that Ilsa and I have a past. He's willing to send her off into the sunset with me to protect her. And I think that's what kind of made Rick change his mind. And then he puts the plan into play on how to get them out. He knew at that moment, even though you really don't know until they get to the airfield how it's going to play out, he knew at that exact moment that he was going to get them out together and he was going to leave.
Yeah. Well, you know, this is, you know, again, you know, it just goes to show his character. And I think it's little things, you know, like you talked about him not caring about anybody or anything other than his club. There are certain people he shows loyalty to. He cared about his whole crew because when he finally did sell to the owner of the Blue Parrot, he told him, you know, if Sasha and you know, the old guy, the professor, and Sam stay with the club, or else I don't sell. And then he lies to him flat out. He goes, and Sam gets 25% of the profit. And the guy goes, I happen to know he gets 10%, but considering, you know, circumstances, I'll give him. Yeah, he is worth 20. I mean, the guy just tries to flat out buy him. And you know, and that right there just goes to show the seedy underbelly of what was going on in Casablanca, with the fact that the guy's like, hey, you know, so you don't want to give Sam to me, and you know, and Rick tells him, well, I'm not into buying you know, people,
basically
selling human beings, and he goes, well, that's Casablanca's biggest trade, you know. That just the things that are going on, you know, in Casablanca at that time, you knew it was kind of like even though there was law enforcement, it was kind of a lawless area, you know. And also contains, you know, one of the greatest lines again at the very end when Major Strausser gets shot, when Captain Renault says, gather the usual suspects, you know, to the point where they made a movie off of that line, the usual suspects. That's where it comes from. But, you know, overall, great film. Overall, I mean, I think that, like Gabriel said, this is one of those movies you could go back if you wanted to become a budding movie producer, movie director. This is one of the movies to go study, because this is how it's done.
With that said, why don't we go ahead and score this bad boy, because we're coming up over the hour mark. So, Gabriel, why don't you go ahead and give us your score and a quick breakdown?
All right. So, of course, plot line, I gave it a 5. Really good story. This was said. I loved the writing and everything that went along with it. And of course, again, it's a timeless classic. So you would figure you got it. If you don't follow the storyline, then you're just not going to get it. So 5, I gave it on plot. Star power, of course. At the time, both of these actors were top shelf. So it's kind of hard to, you know, knock them for that. So they got a 5 there as well, as far as having big names, because that was part of what was a big draw for this movie. So I really thought it, and quality of acting, you know, a lot of great characters. Some of them I could have, you know, some of them were I don't want to say they weren't shitty, but they could have been little bit stronger built, but I don't think that's what it's based off of. It's morely based off of the main characters anyway. So I just gave it a 4 on that one. Really didn't knock it too much. And then of course emotional buy-in. You got to buy in the story from the very beginning, and then once Ingrid walks, what do I want to call her? Her real name, Elsa. So when Elsa walks in, you really buy into the emotional part of it. You see you see where his emotions lie. You start seeing a lot of old emotions start coming up. You start seeing he starts to change as a person. So yeah, you want to buy into these characters actually really at some point being in love and what their past was. So I gave them, of course, a 4 on that. And of course, would I watch it again? Of course. I gave it a 5. So altogether, they have a 23 for me.
Wow, that's a good score. Very strong.
All right, Roll. Let's get yours, Roll.
Well, total score for me is going to be 22. A lot of the points that Gabriel made resonate for me as well. Plot, it was very solid. I gave it a 4.5. It was almost a perfect plot. Star quality, same thing. I think you register in the context of when those stars were on the screen. So I gave it a 5. Acting, I gave it a 4.5 because even the quirky characters that were in the movie were really good. They were really good characters. Sam was really good. And you could feel the chemistry between Bogey and Ingrid. I mean, it was, you really felt passion there. And Bogey was such a cool character. I agree.
Yeah, man, he really, really was.
Just his character, the way he pulled it off was phenomenal. So I gave that 4.5. Oh, and even Inspector or Colonel Inspector Renault, whatever.
Captain Renault.
Captain Renault. His character was great too.
Yeah.
So that's why I gave him 4.5 on acting. Emotion, I gave it a 4 because again, I felt the love. I felt the pain that Bogey was going through, or Rick, in the context of the character that he was going through, and the resentment. But I also felt it change in him, right? That once he had that moment, he knew. And then would I watch it again? Absolutely. So I gave that a 4. So 22.
All right, RJ.
All right, so plot, gave it a 4. I think it's a great plot. I think for me, from the plot perspective, I grew up on movies that a little more intense, a little more dramatic. So for me, it's great. It's a great movie. But plot wise, I give it a 4. I don't think that's bad. Star power 4. Obviously, going back and doing some research, this was a great movie, great star power. Just for me, it's a 4 just because for me qualifying it, obviously this is not, how do I put it? It's not Leonardo. It's not necessarily, what I'm accustomed to, but, star power, I give it a 4. Quality of acting 5. I love the whole movie. I don't really know what else to say more than that. I mean, I just felt like every character kind of played a good role, and every actor had their moments in the movie. Emotional buy-in 3, just from the standpoint that once again, just I'm used to a little more bit of a different film, and that's not to diminish Casablanca any bit. It's just like I said, I'm accustomed to a different kind of film. Watch again 5, definitely. I actually kind of want to go watch it again. I'll watch it again already. Total score of 21.
21. All right, and then for me, plot, I gave it a 5. Again, this is one of my favorite movies. This is one of those movies that made me want to watch old movies. I was never really into black and white movies until I saw this one, and it made me, again, after watching Humphrey Bogart, and this made me want to go back and start watching Humphrey Bogart movies. Star power, I gave it a 5 because even with Bogey and Ingrid Bergman leading the pack, you still had some really big stars at the time. Paul Henry, who played the husband Laszlo, Claude Rains, who played Captain Renault, Sidney Greenstreet, the guy who played Ferrari, the owner of the Blue Parrot. These, and Peter Lorre. These are all A-list actors. If you look in the context of the time when they were stars, they were all A-list actors. So I gave them a 5 for star power. Quality of acting, I gave it a 4. The acting in this movie is very, very strong. I mean, I think all the characters are very believable as the characters that they play. Emotional buy-in, like Roland said, you feel the love story developing. You feel the anger inside Rick when Ilsa comes back into his life. You feel, the emotion that Ingrid Bergman exudes in the scenes where she's, confessing her love to Rick, when she's crying and saying she would be willing to leave her husband to be with Rick if he would let her husband go. As far as would I watch it again? 5. I've seen this movie multiple times. So for me, it's a 23. So looking at that, that's 46, 60, 68, 84. 68, 69, 89 for this. So 89 overall for Casablanca out of a possible 100, and 82 for Parasite out of a possible 100. So man, really too close to call.
If you want to go writing wise and how to put a script together, do this, fucking watch this movie. You go watch this movie, go watch Full Metal Jacket. That's another one you go watch and say, wow, I'm blown away by the way the writing is. They're both great movies.
Full Metal Jacket is a show unto of itself, man. That movie. Okay, well, guys, thanks for joining us again this evening, Gabriel. Thanks for the input. Thanks for the extra work you're giving me this week.
And the shock value.
Yeah, because I really am going to have to go through and monitor and beep out some content here.
You got to block that out.
Hey, but you can be fun with it, right? Like how I was with the sombrero last week.
Right. So for the shock value, I give Gabriel 5 out of 5.
5 out of 5.
Oh, definitely. I gave him a 10 out of 5, man, because that's okay. Well, thanks for that input. That's our show for tonight, guys. Thank you for joining us again this week. Don't forget, voting will be open tomorrow. RJ will have the poll up. Go cast your votes, man. This is going to be a really, really hard decision this week. Casablanca, Parasite, 2 really, really great movies, 2 Academy Award-winning movies with great plots for both movies. But go out there and vote. And guys, thank you for your time again this week. Remember, watch us on YouTube, right? Go down and give us a like and click the bell, get our content. Don't forget to listen to our audio versions on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and iHeartRadio. Don't forget to give our Facebook page some love. Don't forget to give our YouTube page some love and our Reddit page some love. Just search for the Now That You Mention It podcast. Give it a like there.
Instagram.
And Instagram. Yeah, don't forget Instagram. And thank you, Jessica P, because we couldn't do it without you.
And check us out on Podbeans.
And sorry to any French or other people we've offended.
Yes.
All right, guys. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Night.